crowd.
Oh, I wish.
Should every MD be required to, at some point of his or her career, to either teach or be involved in research so that it qualitatively enhances their patient care?
I think every MD probably is involved in teaching when you think about what they do. That first of all, you've got patients, and so there's a transfer of information. That's a type of teaching. You typically have a staff of nurses and other people who are working with you and paramedical people. So I think that even though you may not be formally teaching students like we think of in medical school or residents, I think you are transferring information. Your point about research, I think, is a really good one because I think a great way to be able to read the literature and understand the literature, to have participated in writing things and doing some research so you understand what the pitfalls are. That everything that's written in an article probably needs to be interpreted a little bit. And I think if you've done some research, you have a bit of experience in saying, I'm not quite sure about that. Like hydroxychloroquine, I'm not quite sure whether that's going to be the answer or not.
We'll get into that one then. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is live on Bellevue TV. This segment is called Perspectives. And I'm joined by my co-host, Alexis Dixon from Mediation Solutions International. And we are here today on this segment with a very special guest, and also known as my partner. This is Edward Holmes, MD, and he is the current CEO and president of the Sanford, gosh, I haven't said that one in a long time, Sanford Consortium for Regenerative Medicine. And so Bella Vista, I mean, we're here in essence because this gentleman was a driving force and pioneer in the whole concept of bringing about the collaboratory on the Mesa. And so not only is he current president and CEO of SCRM, he also is, well, not yet, not right now anymore, but he's been flying back and forth to Singapore. He has a huge role in pioneering the biotech region in Singapore. And that's the easy acronym, Ed, that I learned.
Okay.
Because it's A*STAR. We'll get to that one. Welcome. It's so good to see you. I know usually we see you pop into the cafe for your morning coffee and whatever meetings you got going on. So hopefully that'll happen soon. But welcome and thank you for taking time today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be with my partner. That this has been, actually, we do have to talk a little about the partnership because it's been a fantastic, I think, benefit, hopefully for you, but I think for the entire community and the consortium. So it's worked out well. We're looking forward to getting you back soon.
Deal. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit of science today. We've got 30 minutes with Ed, and I think what's interesting is if we just kind of start when you arrived at the Mesa. So you arrived in 2000, is that correct?
Correct.
As the dean, you left Duke and you came to UC San Diego as the dean of the medical school. Yeah. And I mean, your journey just starting from 2000 up until now in 20 years, I think it's probably amazing, and you should be super proud of what this university has accomplished. I mean, in just the 5 years you were there, you saw
six. Don't cut it short.
Right? I mean, you saw, what was it, SCAG, so like the pharmaceutical school. This is
School of Pharmacy, yeah, the Moores Cancer Center, Sulpicio Cardiovascular Center.
Yeah.
It was a busy and wonderful time.
Right, lots of growth.
Well, I was talking to Alexi about the fact that I've been fortunate to be at some great institutions in my career at Duke and Penn and Stanford. And when I got the phone call from Bob Dines to come to UCSD, to me, it was the perfect place to sort of, didn't turn out to be the end of my career, but towards the end of my career. And this community of San Diego, to me, is a very, very special place. That the academics at UCSD are really extraordinary. That I remember when I went to the University of Pennsylvania as head of the Department of Medicine, I'd gone to med school there, and a colleague said, "You'll love it, Ed. It's 150 years of tradition unimpeded by progress." And God, I hope no one from Penn's on this thing. But when I got to UCSD, it was like 40 years of progress unimpeded by tradition. The place is just, it's just sort of crazy, and it's open, and it's really so accessible. And then it's closely tied to the biotech community here. So you've got UCSD and Salk and Scripps and Burnham and La Jolla Allergy and Immunology as independent research institutes. Then you've got this plethora of biotech companies. And so I think that really facilitates the transfer of medical discovery to patients, because we don't make drugs or we don't make devices. We need to do that with the private sector. And San Diego, in my view, is probably what it was like in the Bay Area, I don't know, 50 years ago. At least when I went to Stanford, it was sort of old hat there about doing this, whereas this is still young and vibrant in San Diego. And to me, that was the attractive part of getting to come here. Besides, it's sort of not a bad place to live on top of that.
Yeah, speak to some of when you talk about an environment that's 40 years unimpeded by history, it's quite an innovative, dynamic environment that allows for a lot of great minds to come and do a lot of great things. So speak about how the collaboratory harnesses that kind of intellectual heft and do it at both not only an institutional level, but an international level.
Yeah. Well, maybe sort of two examples, if I might. One is the reason I'm here, I guess, is the Sanford Consortium is almost, if not unique, it's certainly very unusual in academia to find how this came about. It's a pretty fascinating story that obviously, first of all, was Bob Klein and Larry Goldstein, a lot of people who had the vision about the importance of stem cells and getting CERM formed so that there were some resources to work with. So getting the good citizens of California to approve a bond initiative for $3 billion made it a lot easier to think about doing something like this. But when those resources became available, I think San Diego took an approach that no one else has, which is let's get these 5 institutions working together to do something that maybe can't be done any other place. And so it was really unusual to see the faculty in the 5 institutions from the very get-go wanting to work together. And then you had these community leaders who had the same vision, people like John Moores and Erwin Jacobs and Malin Burnham and Denny Sanford obviously joined this and became extremely critical to what we are. And so we had if you will, a push from the top, and we had a drive from the bottom. And I think that was critical because institutions tend to be a bit parochial. And to think about getting 5 institutions to allow faculty from those 5 places to move into this new building and work together is a pretty unusual concept. And I think if the faculty hadn't been pushing, if the people in the community leaders hadn't wanted this to happen, it probably never would have, because it was a little challenging at first to put this thing together. And so it's, again, in my experience, unusual to find people from 5 institutions who wanted to live and work together. And what's really, I think, unusual here is that we have a scientific steering committee who chooses who gets to come into the building. So the scientists are self-selected to come in. And you occasionally get a nominee who the institution would say, if I got a great person for you, but they don't necessarily want to collaborate with everyone else. And so the spirit of collaboration, or the collaboratory, as you mentioned, was critical, that you have to be not only a good scientist, but someone who wants to collaborate. And then another thing that started from the beginning, which I think has worked out splendidly, has been the multidisciplinary nature of this. It's not only clinician scientists and basic molecular biologists or informatics people connected to the San Diego supercomputer, but they're engineers in this building as well. So you've got this mixture of disciplines. And because of the way the building is set up, too bad we can't show a picture of it, but it's got more glass, I think, than any other building in San Diego per square foot. And so it's a very, very interactive physical structure, people from different disciplines, people from different institutions. Occasionally we have some spats, but it has been, I would say, by and large, an extraordinarily successful experiment of bringing together 5 cultures and people who work and live together very, very well, doing some fascinating science. So to me, that's been an extraordinary experience to be a part of that at this stage in my career.
What are some of the innovations that came out of?
There's a picture of the building.
There's
Thank
the
you.
picture. Yeah.
I see all the glass that's there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I
And
think it's interesting. Go ahead. Sorry, Ed, go ahead.
with the architecture, there's stairwells everywhere in the building, so that people tend to work together on the same floor quite frequently. But working vertically is not easy, and so this openness in the building, I think, promotes that. There are coffee pots everywhere scattered around. You can write on the walls of the building in most places, and things that force people to work together. So yeah, it's a very positive building.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's there's, when I think of the kind of collaboration that requires, transparency seems to be the biggest word. Trust and transparency, TNT.
Yeah.
And can you talk about that measure of transparency? Because in science, one is usually rewarded for this kind of siloed individualism, right? I'm in my lab, I'm doing my research. And here you're talking about transparency and collaboration as a way of actually innovating. Can you talk about how the culture speaks to that?
So I might take a slightly different view from your interpretation, and that yes, we all want to get promoted and we have to write papers and we have to put our names on them. But I think the spirit of science is one of collaboration, that most people I know who are in this business want to answer a question. And oftentimes to answer that question, you don't have all of the expertise you need yourself. So that's why this model has worked so well, is people wanted to be in this building because they wanted to work with someone, let's say someone at Salk wanted to work with someone at UCSD. And here in San Diego, people move around institutions a bit anyway, but the ability to collaborate, I once had a mentor who said, the ability to collaborate is inversely proportional to the square of the distance that separates you. So having all of these people in one building with coffee pots and this openness, I think there's a natural tendency to want to do that. And I think it's fostered. So yes, transparency is really critical. And our transparency, I think, comes about because we're all motivated to want to publish the results. That's sort of how we get measured in an extent of what do we publish. So that is an ultimate transparency when you say to the world, here's my data. But you mentioned when we were speaking in advance that I think transparency and openness, the whole COVID-19 thing has brought out a whole new dimension to that. And at some point, if we've got time, I'd love to say a word about that, because I think it takes the collaboratory we have in the Sanford Consortium to a whole nother level of what people are doing to work together right at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, I think what's exciting too, and we I mean, it's up to you. This is your show. This is your segment. So whatever time you have. I think what's interesting too is before we jump into COVID, going back to UC San Diego, right? So I feel like they've always been ahead of the curve. You guys were ahead of the curve with the consortium and the collaboratory, right? And creating this space where you're not forcing, but you're enabling people to have those interactions, those serendipitous moments to come together and to meet and to brainstorm. But also now with the global health, right? Global health and also compassion and empathy. Those are two new areas for UC San Diego. So I think guys are doing pretty well.
The new sheriff over there is really a fantastic guy. David Brenner, who succeeded me in this role as vice chancellor and dean, I think has taken UCSD to, a whole new level. That we were fortunate to do a few things when I was there, but I think you're right that adding the new programs, adding the Jacobs Medical Center, having just gotten out of there 2 weeks ago from some elective surgery, what a fantastic academic hospital we have here in town. But there's something in the water or the air in San Diego for collaboration that you don't find a lot of other places. And I remember Larry Smarr, who you guys may know about, Cal IT Squared, maybe you've even had him on the show, that he once said when I was at UCSD, maybe many times, if you look at the geography, San Diego is an interesting place. On one border, we have an ocean. On another border, we have a foreign country. On another border, we've got a desert. And on another border, we've got a huge marine base. And so we are sort of stuck together here in a way geographically that you don't find in some other cities where people are more spread out. And, there's a history of people going back and forth between institutions. Rusty Gage used to be at UCSD. Now he's at Salk. He's part of the consortium. And so I think there's something very much about the atmosphere in San Diego, this collaboration between these academic institutions, and UCSD being the 800-pound gorilla is sort of, but these private research institutes are a very important part of the chemistry here. And then this intersection between the private sector and the public sector is not, you see that in the Bay Area, you see it in Boston, some in Washington, but I think San Diego in most people's mind is 2 or 3 as far as a biotech startup community. And when I was first at Stanford, they used to say, well, you can't get tenure until you started a company, which was sort of a joke to say it's okay to do that. And I think that same attitude is true here, that it's okay for people from the academic world to take their ideas and work with the private sector to develop them into something that people can use. And so that to me is all part of the chemistry that makes this place work unbelievably well.
How do you see that translating into a multi-generational scientific engagement? You've got these young kids coming up, you've got guys who are wise and brilliant as you are. And so what's the, when we talk about collaboration, generationally, can you speak to the new crop of scientists coming up versus these guys who've been around for a minute or two? And what's the next?
Yeah, so I think that's the really untold secret history why all of these places work. I remember when I was once at Penn, a guy was head of the Association of American Medical Colleges says, you guys walk around beating yourself on the chest about what great teachers you are, whatever. It's this substrate of kids, whether it's medical students or graduate students, which really make the place float. The best, and I think a lot of the really fresh ideas come out of these young people who are introduced to it, whether it's in clinical medicine or it's in basic research. So I think that without the infusion of ideas and energy that come from our students, we would be a much lesser place than we are. And that's why everybody wants to have graduate students in their laboratory. And as we were talking about, I think I'm a much better physician because of the medical students asking those truly embarrassing, penetrating questions about why something was the way that it was. So I think this partnership between students and faculty is a very, very important ingredient.
Interesting. And COVID, should we pivot to COVID? Where are we in the work that you're doing and what does that look like? Where did we start and where are we now?
Yeah, so
the role of San Diego as well, like the consortium, and then also we know that there are some collaborations going on. So what is the CRN's role, UC San Diego's role? And
so the whole COVID thing has been, I think any of us would say, totally unusual in our experiences. And Tony Fauci, I think, is the one who sort of likes to say that, this is an absolute perfect storm. We've got a virus that's a totally new virus to us. We have no medical experience with it. It's extremely infectious. It happens to be quite lethal, and we have no immunity to it. And so this is something that's new to all of us. And obviously it's created a horrible situation, which there are people who are sick and there are people who are dying. It's disrupted our social lives. It's certainly affected our economy in a way. So it's been a plague on society, to say the least, to do this. The upside, if there is an upside to this, to me, has been the force it's produced in driving innovation. And so I give you one example because I happen to know a little bit about that, which is I think what's taking place in developing vaccines around the country is absolutely amazing. There are at least 140 companies trying to do this. Every academic institution is probably trying to build a vaccine. So everybody sees this as being probably the solution or one of the solutions for getting out of the mess that we're in. New medicines will certainly help to do that, but vaccines, if they work, will potentially allow us to go back to what we think of as being normal. And so typically making a vaccine is a 6-7 year, maybe even longer process to do that. We didn't even know what COVID was until practically January of this year. And to think at the moment, there are 140 different companies trying to make a vaccine. There's a company here in San Diego called Arcturus, which is heavy into this. And Ovio is also heavy into this. So we've got 2 biotech companies in San Diego that are making a strong push to develop a vaccine. And they're using a whole new technology, nucleic acids, of using messenger RNA or using DNA. The way we used to make vaccines in the past is that we would take a virus and inactivate it and then grow it in eggs, and it would take forever and forever to do this. It was a very expensive and long process. So imagine we didn't know what COVID was in January. The Chinese sequenced it, released the sequence of that of the gene for this virus. And here we are 4 or 5 months later, having clinical trials, 3 or 4 underway already. This company, Arcturus, here in San Diego, and Ovio is doing clinical trials. Arcturus, in partnership with Singapore, will be starting clinical trials probably within a month from right now. This is extraordinary rate of progress, I think, and it's been because I know Arcturus because I'm on their board of directors in full disclosure, that Arcturus had a technology. Singapore had a set of academic expertise in studying the coronaviruses, the family of coronaviruses. They knew about SARS. They'd had a horrible experience with SARS in the past. And when these two came together, you had complementary expertise that allowed things to move at a pace which was unimaginable. And then you're seeing changes, I think, being driven largely out of the US, but certainly other countries, about the speed with which we're doing clinical trials right now. And this warp speed project, which is really an interesting concept. We're going to start making the vaccine even before it's been proven to be effective, on the chance that it will work, so that maybe by this time next year, maybe even a little sooner, we'll be able to be vaccinating people. So think about that. In 1 year, because of all this innovation going on in the public-private sector, people partnering with each other, like small biotech companies working with large pharmaceutical companies, working with NIH, working with the Singaporean government. And in the UK, you see Oxford working with, I forget which pharmaceutical company they're working with. So you're seeing all of this collaboration because people say, we need to solve this problem and we need to solve it right away. And I'm cautiously optimistic that one of these is going to work out in the next 9 to 12 months. So it's a real game changer from the way things are going on now from what they have in the past. And I think without the emergent force of COVID, we probably wouldn't be there. There's some other things that are going on too, that we're looking at ways to, what repurposing drugs are, where
right.
there are drugs out there that hydroxychloroquine didn't work. Probably doesn't appear to have worked, but it was a good idea. Okay, and so we take a drug developed for malaria or for rheumatoid arthritis, and see whether it can work. So there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there right at the moment trying to find existing drugs which might bump off this particular coronavirus. That working together, that focused effort, I don't think would have been possible without the emergency that we have right now. Mm-hmm. And then something that Tony Fauci talks about a lot, which I think we need to think much more about, is the virus has taught us about at-risk populations. We've always known that there are people who, there are health disparities in this country and every place else. And those are the people who are most severely affected by this particular virus. And so I think it's creating an awareness of these health disparities that we've known have existed, we haven't paid enough attention to. And this has shown an extremely bright light on why we need to do something about our health systems in this country and probably around the world to do that. So they're just examples, I think, of that COVID has changed the way we think, the way we do business. And maybe there are going to be some positive things in a year from now we can talk about from this.
What role do you think technology has played? I know like Bella VTV was built using technology. And there are some of us that are part of the Bella Vista team that have never met in person. And we were hosting another group that the same had occurred, right? They formed a company here in San Diego on the Mesa, and none of them had met. They've all met via Zoom.
Yeah.
We used to go back and forth between San Diego and Singapore, and now that you're here in San Diego, like, are you seeing that this technology is played a crucial role in accelerating that collaboration since people
It,
can't.
it couldn't, well, first of all, with COVID, we can't travel. So
Right.
collaboration wouldn't have taken place. But there's a, quote, lab meeting multiple times a week between the people in Singapore who have the virology expertise, a BSL-3 laboratory, can do some of these assays. The people in San Diego and this company are able to make the messenger RNA and package in a way to deliver it to patients. Those two groups are talking on a daily basis via Zoom or whatever else mechanism they're using. And if we didn't have that, we would, I don't know, probably wouldn't have a project probably. And I'm sure the same is going on with others as well, where they're having laboratory group meetings every day with people around the world. Another thing that's changed the way we work is that reviewing grant proposals now. We used to congregate in a single place, 10 or 15 people, and you get together and talk about these grant proposals. Now we do this by Zoom. I'm not sure we'll ever go back to that. The downside for me and for Singapore is that if you've got people from the UK and people from Australia and New Zealand and the United States on this, I get the short straw because the conference starts at midnight and it goes from midnight to 3 a.m. That's the downside of this. People are doing this all the time. I have them at 7 in the morning and I've got another one later tonight to do. So it's convenient, but sometimes almost too convenient.
Right. Like we talk about that. You have Zoom fatigue and everyone's like, oh, well, the cafe closed down. I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing more work. And it's just hard to explain because your work is at home and now you feel like you got to be on all the time and you're doing it internationally.
Well, this Singapore team and the San Diego team working on this vaccine have never met each other in person because the COVID came along and so they couldn't. So they have only been introduced this way. I think typically a Zoom thing to me works a lot better if you know someone, like you and I know each other, that I think that helps some to do this. But clearly we're all learning to operate that. The other is, I don't know what you guys are doing, but socially that we have virtual cocktail parties. So, you call people up and you say, we can't get together, but you happen to be in New Hampshire, we're here. Can we get together and for 30 minutes and have a drink or something like that? So I think you find people, I know several people in San Diego are having virtual dinners where they sit like this and they each are preparing something and they're eating the food and talking to each other. So there's clearly a big change on the way we lead our daily lives.
On a personal level, you seem to be enjoying this. You seem to be enjoying the work. You seem to be enjoying the energy and the dynamism that comes with doing this research and the global collaboration. And is there a certain amount of renewed energy and vibrancy that comes with this? Is there a certain amount of excitement that comes with this that's unexpected?
You're very perceptive. For me, I knew nothing about vaccines at all. And I find myself voraciously trying to understand how vaccines work, how you can make them better. And whenever I'm allowed to sit in on these lab meetings, it is intellectual. It's almost like I had a laboratory again. When I was a young faculty member and I was at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, I had my own laboratory. Seeing new data is very energizing. If this turns you on, it happens to turn me on. It's been a bit of a rebirth for me of science to be involved in a project like this. So I think there are probably lots of people who are also in this. I know some friends at UCSF who are at the Gladstone Institute there who have put together a major group on repurposing drugs. These are virologists who worked on HIV predominantly, and they're totally turned on and excited about gaining access to these thousands of drugs, hoping they might find one that'll bump off SARS-CoV-2. So I think a lot of people are being energized by this. And you wish it was another reason that got us all together.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
I think that we all are seeing some of that rejuvenation that you appropriately identified.
Well, and I think also you're having pharmacists speaking to physicians, you're having your ER doctors speaking to, and I mean, you have all this cross-pollination of these folks who normally were very much siloed, now actually come together and actually have conversations they've never had before. And a level of respect that they've never had for each other before.
I think you're right. I was saying when you were saying that, another thing that you see organizations, the regulatory agencies like the FDA, or in Singapore, it's called the Health Science Authority, who are working more directly with groups trying to develop vaccines or drugs, that in the past, we weren't adversaries, but we didn't work as closely together because of the urgent need to do this. You see people saying, what can we do that's safe, but also will allow us to be more efficient to get these things to patients? And that to me has been a very refreshing aspect of this, is to see disciplines that didn't see themselves working as closely together as they might, doing that now.
Yeah.
I had a question. Going back to your decision to go to Singapore, why Singapore?
So that's really interesting. So when I was the vice chancellor and dean at UCSD,
Mhm.
we all have advisory bodies. I'm sure David Brenner has one. One of mine was a guy from Singapore named Philip Yeo, who happens to be the father of someone you know well named Gene Yeo. And I had been doing some consulting in Singapore, and Philip Yeo agreed to be on my advisory board. And so when I was stepping down as the vice chancellor and dean here, I was at a meeting in Singapore, and Philip said, well, what are you going to do when you retire from UCSD? And I said, I don't know. And he said, why don't you come to Singapore? And I laughingly said, well, why don't you make me a job offer? And he said, well, maybe we will. And so this was on a Friday. On Sunday, I'm back in San Diego, and I get an email from Philip, and he says, can you and Judy meet me and Sydney Brenner in Paris Saturday for dinner? And I said, yeah, I can go to Paris for dinner. That sounds like fun. So we flew to Paris, and Philip and Judy and Sydney and some other people concocted this idea of what we might do. And literally 10 days later, a contract arrived in the mail. And I said, wow, if these people can do something like that, it might be fun to spend some of my time. And about the same time, John Moores, who you guys will remember from the Moores Cancer Center, said, well, look, we need somebody who's totally unaligned now to be the president and CEO of this new stem cell consortium. And you're going to get to do that too, Ed. So I got stuck with both of these things, and it's been a tremendous experience. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And United Airlines has loved me.
The twins made their television debut on.
I saw that. Aren't they amazing? Yeah.
Oh, I just want to open so we can hold them.
Yeah.
Energy. I think Alexis touched on it too. Like, what always amazes me is your endless source of energy and excitement for what you do. Where does that motivation come from?
Oh, I think well, I guess so. It has to come from inside the person, but I think it's the people you work with. If you are fortunate to live in work in a place like this or the other institutions I've been a part of, bright people are very energizing. We've got all these students who ask these really embarrassing questions that you have to go seek answers to. You got patients who have disorders that you want to do something about. So I think it's the substrate of the people, and the fact that you get to ask questions that are new. It's I've never made a really big discovery in my life, but I think little insights you get to how systems work is unbelievably stimulating, and I think keeps you energized. That's not to say when it doesn't work, it's pretty darn depressing, but it is. I think it's the nature of the beast. Most everybody I know who's involved in academic medicine is excited about it. And I remember one of my bosses at Duke, I once said, this is absolutely so amazing. I can't believe they pay you to do this. I almost feel guilty. And he says, well, I'm going to relieve you of some guilt then. I'm going to cut your salary. He didn't, but it stopped me from saying that going forward. But it does. You feel just blessed to be in this business.
Well, there's something about curiosity, isn't there? I mean, there's no substitute for curiosity, is there? I mean, if you have a bright mind, you are by default a curious human being. And I think the moment that your curiosity wanes, you begin to decline.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
if you can see an insight too that you don't know that anybody else has seen, they may have seen it, but that to me was always a driving force to get some little picture of maybe how a disease disorder worked in people or how something in the laboratory worked at a molecular level. It made things turn over that got me really excited about this. So I do feel very fortunate to have been a part of all of this and continue to be engaged in this. It's really makes you feel younger. If it only made us grow hair, huh? Like if we had that, then we'd really be.
2 weeks ago, we know where you were, Jacob's minute.
It's all that thinking, Ed. It's all that thinking. It's fun. So, is there a company? I mean, who's out there that's innovating, that's on the cutting edge that we should keep our eye on? I know there's a lot of companies out there just really involved in finding a solution to this. But I mean, who's out there that you're really keeping an eye on and feel that maybe they've got something ahead of the pack?
Well, again, the area I just happen to know a little bit about because of this company here is I think if you look at a number of the vaccine companies right at the moment that are two I mentioned who are here in San Diego who are really leaders in this business, who are one's in clinical trials, one will soon be in clinical trials. What an amazing event that would be if one of these companies locally actually ended up with a vaccine that could be used globally. That would be, that to me would be not only great science, but it's what we all dream about is doing something that makes a difference. You know, on the stem cell side, going back to that, we've got some companies that are beginning to do some really interesting things. There's a company here called ViaCyte in San Diego that's involved in trying to come up with a stem cell therapy for type 1 diabetes. Here's a devastating disorder that if they could use stem cells to do something, that these are local companies, but there are, you know, it's hard to pick one, Alexis, because there are so many. You don't know who's going to win in these games. That's why it's great. We've got 140 companies trying to make a vaccine. Yeah, because one of them or two of them or three of them are probably going to make it. So as a friend of mine used to say, who was head of R&D at GlaxoSmithKline, when I was on their scientific advisory board, you know, you got to take a lot of shots on goal, like a hockey match, and you don't know when they're going to go in. So it'll be a lot easier a year from now to say who the heroes are than it is today.
And
you know, I have to depart in 5 minutes. Okay, just to give you.
I'm going to put my my mommy cap on and ask you, you know, as a mom and as you know, my son Leo.
Yeah, this
is kind of scary, right? Not only for us parents, but for the children as well. What are some of your recommendations or your advice on what we should be doing? Should we be concerned? Should we be physical distancing? Should we be wearing masks? You know, there's a lot of different opinions.
Those are the easy. You asked me several easy questions.
Okay.
Should we be wearing masks? I just can't imagine why anyone would not. I mean, first there's a self-preservation part of it, but even if you don't think you have to worry about it, to not have enough interest in society to wear a mask and to protect your parents and your grandparents and your neighbors, to me is just, I hope the governor, I think he did, says they're going to start fining people. I think in Singapore, they fine you and they put you in jail if you don't wear a mask. And so I think this is just silliness. It shouldn't be a political issue to do that. Mm-hmm. Social distancing, it works. I mean, why shouldn't you? I haven't eaten. I mean, I had a lot of takeout, but I haven't eaten in a restaurant now in 3 or 4 months. It's breaking my heart. I love to go to a restaurant because I don't want to sit at a table with someone. I mean, if I went with my wife, probably I would feel okay about it. So I think social distancing is really, really important. Washing your hands. This is so simple to do that. So why people are not doing this to me is sort of craziness. I think the harder thing, I thought you were going to ask me, how do you explain all of this to your son when they're trying to grasp? I mean, what does a pandemic mean to them? Why can't I go to school, mommy? Why can't I play with all of my buddies? Why can't I hug people anymore? This has got to be really hard on little people. And at least the things I've seen on television, is you have to talk to people, talk to your kids about this and explain it. Tell me, how does it work? Does Leo get it? Does he understand when you tell him about it?
Leo, oh, he's so ahead of the curve. Leo actually took himself out of school 2 days before school shut down. And he said, I do not want to get any of my friends or be responsible from other friends who have parents that are immunocompromised. He's like, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want that weight. So he took himself out of school 2 days early. He's been very angry and upset. And so have the other kids when they see adults walking around not wearing masks. So he's just like, they're very frustrated at the adults around the world that can't abide.
Good for them. Good for them. Yeah.
But he does like the extra time playing video games.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be tough because you're not sure whether it's a video game or he's doing his homework. It's
it's
both you. Okay, it's video games to do that. Yeah. Well, so guys, this has been fun. I think it's tremendous that you do all that you do, Amanda and Alexis. For us, at our community has benefited, I think, from having the Bella Vista, not just as a place to get food, but you've created a connectivity up there that, I mean, everybody talks about. The Sanford Consortium is a place to come and hang out now. And hopefully we'll be able to do that again in the not too distant future. But that sort of connectedness, I think, has been so important. So thank you for not only feeding us, but for, more importantly, giving us a venue that gets together, because you spend a lot of time not just thinking about what you're going to serve there, but things like this that the community really needs. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Before you leave, I know you've got to go. Give us a definition of leadership. How will you define leadership in the time of COVID?
Why did you save the hardest question for the last? Yeah, to do that.
This is my secret weapon.
I have probably a strange definition of leadership, but my definition of leadership in general, and I think it works here, is people who are truly good leaders are able to surround themselves with people who are better and smarter than they are. And a mentor of mine at Duke a long time ago told me that, said, if you want to be a good leader, surround yourself with people who are better than you are. A lot of people just don't get that, to do that. And so I think if you want to help to shape an organization and have it go somewhere, you have to be able to bring people to work with you who are smart and are collaborative and are trustworthy. And I think good leaders are able to identify those people and pick them out and then recruit them to work with them. So that's my definition. Others, I'm sure, have other definitions.
Pleasure meeting you, Ed. Hope to see you soon.
Likewise, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day. All right.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and I got to turn this thing off.
You can hop off. We'll wrap up. You go, and you got calls, man.
Okay.
See you soon. So thank you guys for tuning in to Bella V TV. I'm teary-eyed. I love Ed. Like every day is better when Ed pops into the cafe. So it's getting a little bittersweet being shut down, but I hope we reopen. And you're gonna find this. We have Bella V TV. So please like and subscribe to Bella V TV on YouTube. And we will keep you informed with our next segment of Perspectives. We're gonna take next week off because it's 4th of July. And when we come back, we'll be, focusing a bit more on the civil unrest issues that are going on here. And we might also be right back talking about COVID. So do check us out. We love you. Thank you for your support. And we'll see you soon on Bella V TV. Thanks, Alexis.
Be safe. Love one another.
Okay. Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.